Asher Cole slammed his fist into the hood of a rusted Chevy so hard his knuckles split open. Blood smeared across the chipped paint, but he didn't feel it. All he felt was the crumpled eviction notice in his back pocket and the sound of his 7-year-old son asking, "Dad, are we gonna be okay?" He couldn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. But what Asher didn't know was that in exactly 48 hours, a woman in a 1967 Mustang Fastback would pull into his life and rip everything he believed about himself apart. What she offered him would change everything, but what she was hiding, that could destroy him. Stay until the very end, because the twist in Part 5. Nobody sees it coming. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss a single part. Now, let's begin. The phone rang at 6 in the morning, and Asher Cole already knew it was trouble. He grabbed it off the nightstand, squinting at the number. Hank Dillard. His landlord. The man who smiled at you while sliding a knife between your ribs. Hank. Asher said, his voice still rough with sleep. Asher, I'm going to keep this short. You're 2 months behind. I gave you grace. I gave you more grace than my ex-wife gave me, and that woman was a saint. But I got a buyer looking at the property, and I need you current, or I need you out. Asher sat up. The mattress springs groaned underneath him, like they were protesting the conversation too. Hank, I told you. I've got 3 jobs lined up this week. A transmission rebuild-a-brake job, and you told me that last month. Last month I had Elliot in the hospital with pneumonia. You know that. Silence on the other end. Then Hank sighed. 2 weeks, Asher. That's all I got. After that, I gotta do what I gotta do. The line went dead. Down the hall, a door creaked open. Small. Down the hall, a door creaked open. Small footsteps. Then a voice that always made his chest ache. Dad, who was that? Asher dropped his hands and looked at Elliot standing in the doorway. 7 years old. Pajamas with rockets on them 2 sizes too big because Asher always bought ahead. Hair sticking up in 6 different directions. Eyes too sharp for a kid his age. Nobody bud. Just a wrong number. Elliot didn't blink. You're lying. Your jaw does that thing when you lie. Asher almost laughed. Almost. What thing? It gets tight, like you're chewing something invisible. Get dressed, Elliot. I'll make breakfast. We're out of eggs. Then I'll make toast. We're out of bread, too. Asher stared at his son. Elliot stared back. Neither of them looked away. All right, Asher said quietly. We'll stop at Margie's on the way to school. I'll figure it out. You always say that. And I always do. Don't I? Elliot thought about it. Then he nodded once, turned around, and padded back to his room. Asher watched him go and felt something crack inside his chest that he'd been holding together with duct tape and stubbornness for 3 years. He got up, got dressed, pulled on his work boots, the ones with the sole peeling off the left toe, grabbed the eviction notice off the kitchen counter where he'd thrown it last night and read it one more time as if the numbers might have changed overnight. They hadn't. $2,800. That's what stood between his son having a roof and his son not having one. $2,800 and 14 days. He folded the notice and put it in his back pocket. Then he made himself stand up straight, roll his shoulders back, and walk out the front door like a man who had a plan. He didn't have a plan. Margie's Diner sat at the corner of Main and Elm, and it had looked exactly the same since 1974. Asher knew because there was a photograph nailed above the register showing the grand opening, and the only thing that had changed was the price of coffee. Margie herself was behind the counter. 62 years old, arms like a dock worker, heart like a cathedral. 2 eggs toast and orange juice for the little man, she said before Asher could open his mouth. And coffee for you, black. Sit down. Margie, I can't. Did I ask you a question? Sit down. Elliot was already climbing onto a stool. Thanks, Miss Margie. You're welcome, sweetheart. At least one of you has manners. Asher sat down. He wrapped his hands around the coffee mug and felt the heat seep into his knuckles. The ones he'd split open on the Chevy hood last night. Margie noticed. She always noticed. You hitting cars again? The car started it. Mm-hmm. She poured his coffee and leaned on the counter. How bad is it, Asher? He glanced at Elliot, who was already focused on the placemat drawing a car with the crayon Margie kept behind the register for him. Bad enough, Asher said quietly. Margie nodded. She didn't push. That was the thing about Margie, she knew when to talk, and when to just stand there and let a man hold his coffee. You know, she said after a minute, Bobby Trask was in here yesterday. Said he's looking for someone to restore a '70 Chevelle he picked up at auction. Might be good money. Bobby Trask doesn't pay until he's satisfied, and Bobby Trask is never satisfied. Fair point. Margie refilled his cup. Something'll come through, Asher. It always does. That's what I keep telling Elliot. Then maybe start believing it yourself. She walked away to take another order, and Asher sat there drinking coffee he couldn't pay for watching his son draw a car that didn't exist yet, and wondering how much longer he could keep pretending everything was fine. The garage was a cinder block box on Route 12 with a hand-painted sign that read, Cole Automotive, in letters that were fading faster than Asher's optimism. He'd inherited it from his father, who'd inherited it from his father who'd built it in 1961 with his bare hands and a case of beer. By 9 o'clock, Asher was elbow-deep in a Ford F-150 that belonged to Dale Perkins, a farmer who haggled like his life depended on it. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out with greasy fingers. A text from St. Catherine's Elementary reminder. Elliot Cole's tuition balance of $1,200 is past due. Please contact the office. Asher stared at the screen. Then he put the phone back in his pocket and went back to work. An hour later, Dale showed up. How's she looking? Dale asked, peering under the hood like he knew what he was looking at. He didn't. Transmission's shot. You need a full rebuild. How much? $1,200. Parts and labor. Dale whistled like Asher had asked for his firstborn. That's steep, Ash. That's fair, Dale, and you know it. I'll give you $800. You'll give me $11, and I'll throw in an oil change. Dale scratched his chin. 1,000. 1,100. Final offer. And Dale, I'm not negotiating because I want to. I'm negotiating because I can't afford not to. Something in Asher's voice must have landed because Dale stopped haggling. He looked at Asher, really looked at him, and nodded slowly. 1,100. But I want her done by Friday. Done by Thursday. They shook hands. Dale left. Asher picked up his wrench and got back to work doing the math in his head. 1,100 from Dale. Maybe 300 from the brake job on Mrs. Chen's Corolla. That put him at 1,400. Still short. Still not enough. He worked through lunch. He worked through the heat. The temperature climbed past 95, and the garage had no air conditioning. Just a box fan that moved hot air from one side of the room to the other like it was doing him a favor. At 2:15 his phone rang. Cole Automotive? Yes, hello. My car broke down. I'm on Route 12 about 3 miles east of town. The engine just stopped. A woman's voice. Calm, but with an edge underneath. Like someone who wasn't used to things not working. What kind of car? A 1967 Mustang Fastback. Asher's hand tightened on the phone. Say that again? A 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. Dark green. Is that relevant? Ma'am, I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up, grabbed his toolbox, and was in his truck before he finished the thought. A 67 Fastback. He'd only ever seen two in his life. One in a magazine when he was 12. One at a car show in Memphis when he was 23. Both times he'd stood there staring like a man seeing the ocean for the first time. He drove east on Route 12, windows down the hot wind blasting through the cab. And then he saw it. Parked on the shoulder hazard lights blinking. The car was everything he expected and more. That fastback roofline, the curves, the way the sun hit the paint and turned it into something alive. And leaning against the driver's door, arms crossed, was a woman who looked like she'd been dropped into rural Mississippi by accident. She wore a white blouse, sleeves rolled to the elbows, dark hair pulled back, sunglasses that probably cost more than his truck. Everything about her was precise, controlled, expensive. Asher pulled up behind her and got out. "You called about the Mustang." She lowered her sunglasses and looked at him. Really looked at him. Grease on his arms, sweat on his forehead, work boots with the sole peeling off. "You're the mechanic." "Asher Cole. What happened?" "I was driving and the engine cut out. No warning, no sputtering, just silence." Asher walked to the front of the car and popped the hood. The engine was immaculate. Someone had taken serious care of this car. He leaned in, checked the obvious things first. Battery connections, fuel line distributor cap. "When's the last time someone looked at the ignition system?" "I don't know. I just acquired the car." "Acquired." He glanced at her. "Most people say bought." The faintest smile. "Most people do." He found the problem in under 5 minutes. A loose wire on the ignition coil. Simple fix. Could have been catastrophic if she'd kept driving and the engine overheated. "Here's your problem," he said, holding up the wire. Connection came loose. Probably vibration from the road. It's an easy fix, but you should have the whole ignition system looked at. Car this age with this kind of value, you want everything tight. He reconnected the wire, checked it twice, then started the engine. It roared to life with a sound that made his heart rate spike. That rumble, that deep mechanical growl. There was nothing else like it in the world. "Try it," he said. She slid behind the wheel and revved the engine. The sound rolled across the empty road like thunder. "Perfect," she said. She turned off the ignition and stepped out. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing." She stared at him. "Excuse me. It was a loose wire. Took me 5 minutes. I'm not going to charge you for that. You drove out here, in this heat, with your own tools, on your own time. And I got to hear a 67 fastback startup. That's payment enough." She was quiet for a moment, studying him. Asher felt like he was being read, like she was turning pages he didn't even know he had. "You know cars," she said. It wasn't a question. "I've been working on them since I could hold a wrench." "No, you know cars. There's a difference between fixing them and understanding them. You understand them." Asher didn't know what to say to that, so he just wiped his hands on his jeans and shrugged. "What's your name?" she asked. "I told you, Asher Cole." "I know what you told me. I'm asking again because I want to remember it." He met her eyes. Green, sharp. The kind of eyes that didn't miss anything. "Asher Cole," he said again. "Cole Automotive, Route 12. She extended her hand. "Serafina. Just Serafina. For now." They shook hands. Her grip was firm, not performative, genuine. And when she let go, Asher felt the absence of it. "Thank you, Asher Cole," she said. "For your kindness. It's rarer than you think." She got in the Mustang. The engine rumbled to life, and she pulled onto Route 12 and disappeared down the road, the dark green fastback getting smaller and smaller until it was just a shimmer in the heat. Asher stood on the shoulder of the road, toolbox in hand, sweat dripping down his back. He had no idea what just happened, but something in his gut, something deep and old and instinctive, told him that the woman who just drove away was not what she seemed. He got in his truck, drove back to the garage, went back to work on Dale's F-150. But he couldn't shake it. The way she looked at him. The way she said his name like she was filing it away. The way she said, "for now," when he asked for her last name. At 3:30, he picked up Elliot from school. The boy climbed into the truck and buckled himself in with the seriousness of a fighter pilot. "How was school?" Asher asked. "Mrs. Patterson says I have to bring in my permission slip by Friday or I can't go on the field trip." "What field trip?" "The Automotive Museum in Jackson." Asher looked at his son. "You want to go to an automotive museum?" "Obviously." "How much is it?" $20. $20. It might as well have been 20,000. But Asher looked at his son's face, the hope in it, the careful way Elliot tried to make it seem like it didn't matter, and he said the only thing he could. "I'll make it happen. Promise. Promise." Elliot nodded and pulled out a folded piece of paper from his backpack. He unfolded it on his lap. It was a drawing. A car. Not a child's scribble, an actual design. Clean lines. Proportional. The kind of thing that made you look twice. "What's that?" Asher asked, already knowing. "It's a car I designed. It's hybrid. Electric for the city, gas for the highway. And the roof panels are solar." Asher pulled the truck to the side of the road. He took the drawing from Elliot and held it up. His hands were shaking, not because the drawing was good, though it was, because it was exactly the kind of drawing Asher used to make when he was 12, when he still believed he'd design cars for a living instead of fixing them for people who haggled over every dollar. "This is incredible, Elliot." "You think so?" "I know so." Elliot beamed. And for one moment, just one, the eviction notice and the overdue tuition and the 14 days didn't exist. There was just a father and his son sitting in a beat-up truck on the side of the road, holding a drawing of a car that didn't exist yet. Then Asher's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He answered anyway. "Mr. Cole, my name is Robert Ainsley. I'm calling on behalf of Sterling Automotive Group. Do you have a moment?" Asher frowned. "Sterling Automotive? How did you get this number?" "I was given your name by a colleague. Mr. Cole, I'll be direct. We have a management position available at our facility, and we believe you'd be an excellent candidate. Would you be available for an interview this week?" Asher almost laughed. Almost. "Sir, I think you have the wrong person. I run a one-man garage on Route 12. I don't have a degree. I don't have a resume. I barely have a—" "Mr. Cole, we know exactly who you are. And we'd like to meet with you. Thursday, 2 o'clock. I'll send the address." The line went dead. Asher sat there, phone in his hand, staring at nothing. "Dad?" Elliot said. "Who was that?" "I don't know, Bud." "Your jaw's doing the thing again." Asher looked at his son. Then he looked at the drawing in his hand. Then he looked at the road ahead, stretching out straight and endless into the heat. Something was happening. Something he didn't understand. And every instinct he had was screaming two things at once. This is your chance. And be careful. He put the truck in gear and drove home, the phone number from Sterling Automotive, burning in his call log like a lit fuse. Asher didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around him, the creak of old wood, the drip of the kitchen faucet he kept meaning to fix, the soft sound of Elliot breathing down the hall. His mind kept circling back to the phone call. Sterling Automotive Group. He'd heard the name before. Everyone in the car world had. They were one of the top automotive engineering firms in the country. Custom builds, restorations, concept vehicles for manufacturers who wanted something nobody had ever seen. The kind of place where people with MIT degrees and Silicon Valley resumes fought for positions. And they wanted to interview him. Asher Cole, a man who couldn't pay his rent. He picked up his phone and searched for Sterling Automotive Group. The website loaded sleek and minimal. Photos of facilities that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Clean rooms, CNC machines, digital modeling stations, cars that hadn't been released yet sitting under studio lights like sculptures. He put the phone down and pressed his palms against his eyes. "This is a mistake," he said out loud. "They've got the wrong guy." But Robert Ainsley had said his name, had said, "We know exactly who you are." That wasn't a wrong number. That wasn't a mix-up. Asher rolled onto his side and stared at the wall. And then, without meaning to, he thought about Serafina. The way she'd looked at him on the side of Route 12. The way she'd said, "You know cars," like she was identifying something she'd been looking for. The timing. The call came hours after she drove away. "No," he whispered. "That's crazy." But it wasn't crazy, and he knew it. He finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning and woke up at 5:30 with a knot in his stomach that wouldn't go away. Thursday came faster than it should have. Asher dropped Elliot at school, kissed him on the forehead, and said, "I might be a little late picking you up today." "Where are you going?" "A meeting." "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where I have to wear a clean shirt." Elliot looked him up and down. "You own a clean shirt." "Get out of my truck." Elliot grinned and hopped out. Asher watched him run toward the school entrance, backpack bouncing, and felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Everything he did was for that boy. Every bolt he turned. Every dollar he scraped together. Every night he lay awake doing math in his head that never added up. He drove home showered and put on the only button-down shirt he owned. It was slightly wrinkled. He ironed it with a pot of boiling water and a towel because he didn't own an iron. Then he stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at himself. 41 years old. Hands permanently stained with grease no matter how hard he scrubbed. A face that looked 10 years older than it should because worry ages you faster than time. He straightened his collar and thought about his father, who'd worked in the same garage until his heart gave out at 58. His father never had an interview at Sterling Automotive. His father never had a mysterious woman show up on the side of the road and change the trajectory of his life. "Don't screw this up," he told his reflection. His reflection didn't look confident. The address Robert Ainsley had texted led him 45 minutes north to a facility set back from the main road behind a wall of trees. Asher almost missed the turn. The entrance was unmarked, just a paved driveway that curved through the woods and opened up into a parking lot filled with cars that each cost more than his house. He parked his truck between a Mercedes and a BMW and sat there for a full minute, hands on the steering wheel, engine idling. "You can still leave," he told himself. "You can back out right now, drive home, and pretend this never happened." But he thought about Elliot's drawing. The hybrid car with solar roof panels. He thought about the eviction notice. He thought about Margie pouring him coffee he couldn't pay for. And he turned off the engine and got out. The lobby was all glass and polished concrete. A receptionist looked up and smiled at him, like he belonged there, which he appreciated, because he felt like he'd walked into someone else's dream. "Asher Cole. I have a 2 o'clock with Robert Ainsley." "Of course, Mr. Cole. Please have a seat. He'll be right with you." Asher sat down in a chair that was more comfortable than his bed. He folded his hands in his lap to keep them from shaking. On the wall across from him was a framed photograph of a car, a custom-built Grand Tourer with lines so clean it made his breath catch. Underneath a small plaque read, "Sterling GT1. Concept. 2019. Beautiful, isn't she?" Asher looked up. A man stood in front of him, mid-50s, silver hair, a suit that fit like it had been born on his body. He extended his hand. "Robert Ainsley. Thank you for coming, Mr. Cole." Asher stood and shook his hand. "Thank you for the invitation. Though I'll be honest, Mr. Ainsley, I'm still not entirely sure why I'm here." "Then let's clear that up. Walk with me." Robert led him through a set of double doors and into the facility. And what Asher saw on the other side nearly stopped him in his tracks. It was the most advanced automotive workshop he'd ever seen. Not a workshop, a cathedral. Bays equipped with diagnostic systems he'd only read about. Lifts that could handle anything from a sports car to a heavy truck. A fabrication area with welding stations, and a paint booth that looked like an operating room. And cars. Everywhere cars. In various stages of assembly, restoration, transformation. "Sterling operates in 3 divisions," Robert said as they walked. "Custom builds for private clients, restoration of classic and vintage vehicles, and concept development for major manufacturers. We have 72 employees across 2 facilities. This is the primary one. Asher was listening, but his eyes kept pulling toward the work being done. A man was hand-stitching a leather dashboard. Another was calibrating an engine on a dynamometer. A woman was welding a custom exhaust manifold with precision that made his hands itch. The position we're looking at is floor operations manager, Robert continued. You'd oversee daily workflow in the restoration and custom build divisions. Scheduling, quality control, client communications, team coordination. Mr. Ainsley, I need to stop you. Asher turned to face him. I appreciate this, I do. But I don't have a management background. I've never run a team. I run a one-man garage in a town most people can't find on a map. I fix trucks and sedans for farmers and school teachers. This, he gestured at the facility around them. This is a different world. Robert studied him for a moment. Then he said, "Come with me." He led Asher to a small office off the main floor. On the desk was a tablet. Robert picked it up, tapped the screen, and handed it to Asher. On the screen was a photograph, the '67 Mustang Fastback, dark green, Serafina's car. You diagnosed a fault in this vehicle in under 5 minutes, Robert said. On the side of a road, in 95-degree heat, with a basic toolbox. It was a loose ignition coil wire. Any mechanic would have caught it. No, Mr. Cole. Any mechanic would have towed the car back to the shop and charged for a full diagnostic. You identified the problem by instinct. And more than that, you recommended a complete ignition system inspection based on the car's age and value. That tells me you understand not just how to fix a car, but how to think about one. Those are different skills. Asher set the tablet down. His heart was hammering. Serafina sent you. Robert didn't blink. I'm not at liberty to discuss how candidates are identified. She did. The woman on Route 12. She's connected to Sterling. Mr. Cole, what I can tell you is this. The person who recommended you has an extraordinary eye for talent. They've never been wrong. And they specifically asked me to meet with you, evaluate you, and if I agreed with their assessment offer, you the position. And do you agree with their assessment? Robert leaned back against the desk and crossed his arms. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've hired engineers from Stanford, designers from Art Center fabricators, from BMW's own training program. You know what most of them had in common. They were technically brilliant and had absolutely no feel for the work. They could calculate torque specs to the decimal point, but couldn't tell you why a car sounded wrong just by listening to it. He paused. 5 minutes ago, when we walked through the floor, you stopped 3 times. Once when you heard the dyno reading on bay 4 because the engine was running slightly lean, and you heard it before the technician did. Once when you looked at the weld on that exhaust manifold because you noticed the bead was inconsistent on the lower joint. And once when you saw the GT1 photograph in the lobby because something about the rear suspension geometry bothered you, and I could see it on your face. Asher stared at him. You were watching me. That's my job. Robert unfolded his arms. The position pays $120,000 annually, plus benefits, plus a performance bonus. You'd start in 2 weeks. The number hit Asher like a physical force. $120,000. He made $31,000 last year, before taxes, before the hospital bills from Elliot's pneumonia, before the transmission on his own truck blew and he had to fix it with salvage parts. I need to think about it, Asher said. His voice came out steadier than he expected. Of course, take the weekend. But Mr. Cole, this offer won't sit on the table forever. Good opportunities rarely do. They shook hands. Asher walked back through the lobby past the receptionist and out into the parking lot. He got into his truck and sat there. Then he put his forehead against the steering wheel and breathed. $120,000. That was the eviction gone. That was Elliot's tuition. That was food in the refrigerator and a sole on his boot. And maybe maybe a life that didn't feel like drowning in slow motion. But something gnawed at him. Because generosity on this scale didn't come free. People like Serafina, people who moved through the world with that kind of power, they didn't hand you a lifeline without a reason. And Asher had learned a long time ago that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually came with a price tag you couldn't see until it was too late. He picked up Elliot 20 minutes late. The boy was sitting on the school steps, backpack on his lap, drawing. "You're late," Elliot said, climbing into the truck. "I know, I'm sorry. You're wearing your clean shirt." "I am." "How was the meeting?" Asher pulled away from the curb. "They offered me a job." Elliot looked at him. "A real job?" "A real job. Good pay. Benefits. The whole thing." "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet." "Why not?" "Because I don't trust it." Asher thought. "Because the last time something good fell into my lap, it came with your mother, and she left us both on a Tuesday morning with a note on the kitchen table and a bank account drained to zero. Because I've been burned so many times that hope feels like a trap." But he didn't say any of that. He said, "Because I want to make sure it's the right move, for both of us." Elliot nodded. "I think you should take it." Yeah. You're good at cars, Dad. You're really good. And you shouldn't be fixing trucks for people who argue about the price. You should be doing something big." Asher's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't listen." Asher laughed. It came out rough and unexpected, like a cough. And Elliot laughed too, and for a moment the truck felt lighter, like it might lift off the road. That night, after Elliot was in bed, Asher sat at the kitchen table with a beer in his phone. He searched for Serafina Lancaster. He didn't know why he added the last name Lancaster. It came to him like a half-remembered song, something she might have murmured as she drove away, or something his subconscious had assembled from the way she carried herself. The search returned results. Serafina Lancaster, heiress to the Lancaster industrial fortune. Quietly acquired controlling interest in Sterling Automotive Group 4 years ago. Net worth estimated at. Asher put the phone down. He picked it up again. He read the number. He put the phone down again and finished his beer in one long pull. A billionaire. The woman he'd helped on the side of Route 12. The woman who'd stood there in the Mississippi heat leaning against a 67 fastback like she was waiting for a bus was a billionaire. And she'd sent her people to offer him a job that would change his life. He stared at the kitchen table. There were crayon marks on it from Elliot's drawings, a water ring from a glass he hadn't moved in 3 days, a crack running through the center that he'd been meaning to glue. This was his life, this table, this house, this town. 20 years of grease under his fingernails, and nothing to show for it but a garage that barely broke even and a son who deserved better. He thought about what Robert Ainsley had said. "You understand cars." He thought about the facility, the tools, the machines, the work being done there. He thought about the GT1 photograph and how the rear suspension geometry had bothered him, how he'd seen immediately that the lower control arm angle would create understeer at high speed, how he'd wanted to grab a pencil and redesign it right there in the lobby. He thought about Elliot's drawing. The hybrid car with solar roof panels. And he thought about Serafina's eyes, green and sharp and seeing things in him that he'd stopped seeing in himself a long time ago. He picked up his phone and called Robert Ainsley. It rang twice. "Mr. Ainsley, it's Asher Cole." "Mr. Cole, that was fast." "I'll take the job." A pause. Then, "I was hoping you'd say that. We'll see you Monday at 8. Welcome to Sterling, Mr. Cole." Asher hung up. He sat at the kitchen table in the dark and the silence and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly. Something deeper. Something more dangerous. Possibility. He got up, walked down the hall, and opened Elliot's door. The boy was asleep, curled up with his sketchbook on the pillow next to him, a pencil still in his hand. Asher gently took the pencil, set it on the nightstand, and pulled the blanket up to his son's chin. "We're going to be okay, bud," he whispered. And for the first time, in a very long time, he almost believed it. Monday morning arrived like a starting pistol. Asher was up at 5. He'd spent the weekend closing out his existing jobs. Finished Dale's F-150, completed Mrs. Chen's brake job, and locked up Cole Automotive with a handwritten sign in the window that read, "Closed temporarily. Back soon." He dropped Elliot at school early. The boy was vibrating with excitement. "First day," Elliot said. "Don't mess it up." "Thanks for the confidence." "I'm serious, Dad. Don't talk too much. Listen, and don't argue with people on your first day. You argue with everyone." "I do not argue with everyone." "You argued with the cashier at the gas station yesterday about the correct tire pressure for a Camry." "Because he was wrong." "See, you're doing it right now." Asher pointed at the school. "Out." Elliot grinned, grabbed his backpack, and ran. At the door, he turned and gave Asher a thumbs up. Asher returned it, and the boy disappeared inside. The drive to Sterling took 45 minutes. Asher used every one of them to talk himself out of a panic attack. His hands were steady on the wheel, but inside his organs were rearranging themselves. What if he couldn't do it? What if they took one look at him in that facility surrounded by people with degrees and pedigrees and realized they'd made a terrible mistake? He parked in the same spot between the Mercedes and the BMW. The Mercedes was gone. A Porsche had taken its place. Asher looked at his truck rust spot's cracked windshield, a bumper held on by zip ties, and almost laughed. Inside, the receptionist greeted him by name. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. Robert is expecting you in Conference Room B." Conference Room B had a glass table, leather chairs, and a view of the workshop floor through a long window. Robert was there, along with a man Asher hadn't met. He was mid-40s, thick through the shoulders with a buzz cut, and hands that said he worked for a living. His name tag read, Garrett Vaughn, Senior Technician. "Asher Cole, meet Garrett Vaughn," Robert said. "Garrett runs the restoration team. He'll be your primary point of contact on the floor." Garrett didn't stand up. He looked at Asher the way a dog looks at another dog entering its yard. "Cole," he said. One word, no handshake. "Garrett." Asher extended his hand anyway. Garrett looked at it. Then he reached out and gripped it. Hard, harder than necessary. The kind of handshake that was a test. Asher didn't flinch. He matched the pressure and held it for one beat longer than Garrett expected. Then he let go. Something flickered in Garrett's eyes. Not respect, not yet, but acknowledgement. "Robert tells me you've been working a solo shop," Garrett said. "Trucks and daily drivers." "That's right. And now you're going to manage a team of 12 technicians restoring vehicles worth more than most people's houses." "That's the plan." Garrett leaned back in his chair. "No offense, Cole, but I've been here 9 years. I've seen guys like you come through before. Talented hands, good instincts, but no idea how to run a floor. They last about 3 months before the pressure gets to them, and they quit or get fired. What makes you different?" Asher looked at him. "I've got a 7-year-old who needs me to be different." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Robert cleared his throat. "All right, gentlemen, let's get to work." The first week was brutal. Asher was drowning in systems protocols, software platforms, and a chain of command that made his head spin. He memorized names. He studied workflow charts. He sat in on every restoration in progress and asked questions until the technicians either respected him or wanted to kill him. Garrett watched him the entire time, always nearby, always evaluating, never offering help unless Asher asked for it directly, and even then, the help came with an edge. "You're moving Jenkins to Bay 6, Garrett said on Wednesday, appearing at Asher's shoulder while he was reviewing the week's schedule. "Jenkins is finishing the Aston Martin door panel alignment. Bay 6 has better light." "Jenkins has been in Bay 3 for 2 years. He likes Bay 3. You move him and you'll have a morale problem." "I'll have a quality problem if he's doing precision alignment work in bad light. I'll talk to Jenkins." You do that. Garrett walked away. Asher talked to Jenkins. Jenkins grumbled. Asher listened, then explained his reasoning. Jenkins moved to Bay 6. The alignment work improved by 15%. Garrett said nothing about it, but Asher caught him checking the work, after hours running his hand along the panel fit and nodding once, just once, before walking away. By Friday, Asher was exhausted in a way he'd never been before. Not physically, he'd done harder physical work every day for 20 years. This was a different kind of tired. The kind that comes from carrying the weight of other people's expectations while pretending you know what you're doing. He picked up Elliot and drove home in silence. Elliot, sensing the mood, didn't push. He just sat in the passenger seat, drawing in his sketchbook. Dad. Yeah. Are you okay? Asher glanced at him. I'm figuring it out. Okay. A pause. I got 100 on my math test. That's my boy. And I turned in the permission slip for the museum trip. Asher's chest tightened. He'd put the $20 in an envelope in Elliot's backpack on Tuesday morning. It was the last 20 in his wallet. His first paycheck from Sterling wouldn't come until the end of the month. They were living on fumes and faith. Good, he said. You're going to love it. I know. I'm going to take notes, and I'm going to ask about their engine displays. Mrs. Patterson says they have a cutaway V8 you can see the insides of. Sounds incredible. It is incredible. That's why I want to go. Asher smiled, and the tiredness lifted just a fraction. Just enough. That night, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. How was your first week? He stared at it. Then he typed, Who is this? The response came 30 seconds later. You already know. Asher sat on the edge of his bed, phone in both hands. He typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on one. It was hard. But I'm still standing. A pause. Then, that's all anyone can ask. Good night, Asher. He read the message twice. Then he set the phone on the nightstand, lay back, and stared at the ceiling. Serafina Lancaster, Billionaire. The invisible hand behind Sterling Automotive Group. The woman who'd stood on the side of Route 12 in the Mississippi heat and seen something in a broken-down mechanic that nobody else had ever seen. She was watching. She was waiting. And Asher had the unsettling feeling that his first week at Sterling wasn't just a job. It was an audition. And he didn't yet know what the role was really for. The audition, as it turned out, lasted 6 weeks. Asher threw himself into Sterling with everything he had. He arrived before anyone else and left after the last technician clocked out. He learned the systems. He memorized the inventory. He studied every car on the floor until he could close his eyes and tell you the project status, the client's preferences, and the next 3 steps in the build sequence without looking at a single spreadsheet. And slowly, almost grudgingly, the team started to come around. Jenkins was the first. After the Bay 6 move, he started asking Asher's opinion on alignment tolerances, then on paint matching techniques, then on things that had nothing to do with work at all, his daughter's college applications, his wife's knee surgery, whether the Braves had a shot at the pennant. Asher answered everything with the same steady attention, and Jenkins became his quiet ally on the floor. Others followed. Tanya Reeves, the detail specialist who initially wouldn't make eye contact with Asher, started swinging by his office to show him her finish work before sending it to quality control. Marcus Webb, the youngest technician, began staying late to pick Asher's brain about engine diagnostics. Even old Phil Durkin, who'd been at Sterling since the beginning and answered to no one, grunted a morning at Asher on his 3rd Monday, which Jenkins said was the equivalent of a marriage proposal. The only holdout was Garrett Vaughn. Garrett didn't oppose Asher openly. That wasn't his style. Instead, he existed in a state of permanent skepticism, always present, always watching, always waiting for Asher to fail. Every decision Asher made, Garrett questioned. Not loudly, not in front of the team, but in the margins. a raised eyebrow during a scheduling meeting. A pointed silence when Asher proposed a workflow change. A casual remark dropped in the break room that found its way back to Asher's ears. "He's not against you," Jenkins told Asher one afternoon. "He's testing you. There's a difference. Feels the same from where I'm standing. Garrett's been here 9 years. He thought he was getting the manager position. Then you showed up out of nowhere with grease on your hands and a recommendation from God knows who, and now he's reporting to you. How would you feel?" Asher didn't answer because Jenkins was right, and he knew it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in Asher's 7th week. Sterling had taken on a new project, a full restoration of a 1969 Jaguar E-Type, for a client who'd paid enough money to buy a house. The car was a wreck. Rusted frame, seized engine interior gutted by mice. But underneath the decay was one of the most beautiful machines ever built, and the client wanted it brought back to factory condition. Asher assigned the project to Garrett's team. It was a peace offering, and a vote of confidence rolled into one. Garrett accepted without comment, but Asher caught something in his expression, a flicker of surprise, maybe even appreciation, that disappeared as quickly as it came. 2 weeks into the restoration, Asher was reviewing the progress reports when something caught his eye. The engine rebuild was ahead of schedule, which was good. But the chassis work was falling behind, and the numbers didn't add up. He pulled the welding logs and found that Garrett had reassigned 2 of his technicians to a different project. A rush job for a repeat client without telling Asher. Asher found Garrett in Bay 7, elbows deep in the Jaguar's engine compartment. "Garrett, a word." Garrett straightened up. He had a spark plug in his hand and oil on his cheek. "What's up?" "You moved Martinez and Chen off the E-Type without logging it. The Harrington Porsche needed attention. Harrington's been a client for 6 years. I made a judgment call." "You made a call that wasn't yours to make." Garrett set the spark plug down slowly. The other technicians in the bay went quiet. Not obviously they kept working, kept their heads down, but the energy shifted. Everyone was listening. "Cole, I've been managing workflow on this floor since before you knew Sterling existed. I know which clients need priority and which projects can absorb a delay. And I'm sure you're right about Harrington. But you took 2 guys off a timeline that was already tight, didn't document it, and didn't tell me. If I hadn't caught it in the welding logs, I'd have found out when we missed the deadline. And that's on me, not you. So this is about your reputation. This is about communication. I'm not here to overrule your instincts, Garrett. Your instincts are probably better than mine on half the calls we make. But if we're not talking to each other, this floor falls apart. And I won't let that happen." Garrett stared at him. The silence stretched. Then he crossed his arms and said, "You think you can come in here and change how we operate because someone handed you a title. Nobody handed me anything. I earned this, every day, same as you. You don't know what I've earned. Then tell me." The words hung in the air. Garrett's jaw worked. The technicians had given up pretending to work. Everyone was looking. Garrett took a breath, then another. "Martinez and Chen go back to the E-Type tomorrow. I'll handle the Harrington job myself." "You don't have to do that." "I know, I don't have to. I'm choosing to. There's a difference." He picked up the spark plug and turned back to the engine. The conversation was over. Asher walked back to his office and closed the door. His hands were shaking, not from anger, from adrenaline. He'd stood his ground and Garrett hadn't crumbled, but he'd bent. That was enough, for now. That evening, after picking up Elliot, Asher's phone buzzed. "Dinner, Saturday, 7 p.m. I'll send a car, Serafina. No greeting, no explanation. Just a command disguised as an invitation." Asher typed, "I don't need a car. I can drive. In that truck, no." He laughed out loud. Elliot looked up from his sketchbook. "What's funny?" "Nothing, just a text." "From who?" "A friend." "You don't have friends." "Thank you, Elliot." Saturday arrived, and with it a black car that pulled into Asher's driveway at exactly 6:30. The driver didn't honk, didn't come to the door, just waited. Asher had arranged for Margie to watch Elliot, which had required more negotiation than the Dale Perkins transmission. "You're going on a date," Margie had said, grinning. "It's not a date, it's dinner. With my employer. Honey, when a woman sends a car for you, it's a date." Asher had no response to that. He got in the car and was driven 20 minutes to a restaurant he didn't know existed, tucked behind an unassuming storefront on a street he'd driven past 1,000 times. Inside, it was intimate and understated. No flash, no pretension. Just good food and low light. Serafina was already seated. She wore a dark dress. Simple. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders, and without the sunglasses, her green eyes were even more striking than he remembered. "You clean up well," she said as he sat down. "I own 2 clean shirts now. Got the second one for the occasion." She smiled, and it changed her entire face. The controlled precision softened into something warmer. Human. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for the job. Though I'm guessing we're past pretending that was a coincidence." She picked up her wine glass and took a slow sip. "I don't do coincidences, Asher. So you had Robert call me, because I fixed a loose wire on your Mustang. Because of how you fixed it, and because of what you didn't do." "What didn't I do?" "You didn't charge me. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't look at me like I was something to be leveraged. You just helped. And then you let me go. That's called being a decent person. That's called being rare." She set the glass down. "I've spent 15 years in a world where everyone wants something, where every conversation is a transaction and every handshake is a contract. When I broke down on that road, I expected to be towed, overcharged, and patronized. Instead, I met a man who fixed my car in 5 minutes, refused to take money, and looked at the engine with more tenderness than most people show another human being." Asher didn't know what to do with that, so he reached for the breadbasket. "Tell me about Elliot," she said. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." So he told her. He told her about Elliot's drawings, the cars, the designs, the way the boy thought in systems and structures that Asher recognized because he'd thought the same way at that age. He told her about the pneumonia last winter, the 3 nights in the hospital, Elliot hooked up to an IV, and still asking Asher to quiz him on engine displacement figures. He told her about Elliot's mother Karen, who'd left when Elliot was 3, walked out on a Tuesday, drained the bank account, moved to Portland with a man she'd met online, and never looked back. "She didn't fight for custody," Serafina asked. "She didn't want custody. She wanted out. Elliot was part of the life she was leaving." "And you." "I was the life she was leaving." Serafina was quiet for a long moment. "I understand that. More than you know. Tell me." She looked at him. Then she told him about Victor Langley. Victor had been her husband for 8 years. Handsome. Charming. From old money that had learned new tricks. He'd wooed her with grand gestures and relentless attention, and she'd married him believing she'd found a partner. Instead, she'd found a parasite. Victor didn't want a wife, he wanted access. To her family's wealth, her business connections, her social capital. When she realized what he was and filed for divorce, he turned vicious. Smear campaigns, legal maneuvers, threats whispered through intermediaries. The divorce took 3 years, she said. He contested everything. Dragged it through every court that would listen. Made it his mission to destroy me publicly while draining me financially. The legal fees alone were in the millions. But you won. I survived. There's a difference. She looked at him with those sharp green eyes. Victor doesn't lose Asher. He retreats, regroups, and comes back harder. The divorce was finalized 2 years ago, and he's been quiet since. But he's not gone. Men like Victor are never gone. Why are you telling me this? Because if we continue to spend time together, and I very much want to, you need to know what comes with me. I'm not just a woman with a car company. I'm a woman with an enemy. And Victor doesn't just come after me. He comes after the people I care about." The weight of her words settled over the table. Asher felt it in his chest. Not fear, something more complicated. She was warning him, giving him an exit before things went further. And the fact that she was honest enough to do that made him want to stay even more. "I've been fighting my whole life," he said. "Fighting to keep the garage, fighting to keep Elliot, fighting to keep my head above water in a world that doesn't give you much to hold on to. If you think some rich ex-husband is going to scare me off, you don't know me yet." "I'm beginning to." He held her gaze. "Good." They talked for 3 more hours, about cars, about Elliot, about what it felt like to be underestimated your entire life and then suddenly placed in a room where people expected you to be extraordinary. Serafina listened to Asher the way she looked at him with complete undivided attention, as if nothing else in the world existed. When the car brought him home, Margie was asleep on his couch with a reality show playing on the TV. Elliot was in bed. Asher walked Margie to her car and thanked her. "So," Margie said, "how was the not a date?" "It was good, Margie. Just good. Really good." Margie patted his cheek. "You deserve really good, Asher Cole. Don't forget that." He watched her drive away, then went inside and checked on Elliot. The boy was asleep with his sketchbook again. Asher picked it up and flipped to the latest page. A new car design. Sleeker than the last one. More sophisticated. In the corner, Elliot had written in his careful handwriting, "Cole Sterling Concept 1." Asher closed the sketchbook and pressed it against his chest. The weeks that followed were the best of his life. At Sterling, he hit his stride. The team operated like a machine, smooth, efficient, producing work that made clients gasp. The Jaguar E-Type restoration was on track. Garrett still challenged him daily, but the challenges had shifted from hostile to constructive, like a sparring partner who pushes you because they want you to get better. And Serafina, she became a constant. Not in the way that crowds a person. She understood space, understood that Asher needed room to breathe and prove himself on his own terms. But she was there, as texts in the morning, calls at night, Saturday dinners that became Sunday breakfasts. She met Elliot on a Wednesday afternoon when she stopped by the garage. Asher still went back on weekends to keep it from falling apart, and the boy stared at her Mustang like he'd seen a ghost. "Is that a real '67 fastback?" Elliot asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is," Serafina said. "Wanna sit in it?" Elliot looked at Asher for permission. Asher nodded, and the boy climbed into the driver's seat with the reverence of someone entering a church. "The steering wheel is huge," Elliot said. "No power steering in '67, Serafina said. "You had to mean it when you turned." "Cool," Elliot breathed. Serafina looked at Asher over the roof of the car. He mouthed thank you, and she smiled, that real smile, the one that broke through all her armor, and something locked into place between them that neither of them could have predicted and neither of them could undo. Then Victor Langley came back. It started with an article. A small piece in an industry trade publication, nothing most people would see. The headline read, "Sterling Automotive's new hire raises questions about qualifications and nepotism." The article didn't name Asher directly, but it didn't need to. It described a recently hired floor manager with no formal education, no management experience, and a personal connection to the company's majority stakeholder. It quoted unnamed sources within the company who expressed concerns about favoritism undermining team morale. Asher found the article on a Tuesday morning. He read it twice, then put his phone down and stared at the wall. Robert Ainsley called him an hour later. "Have you seen it?" "I've seen it." "It's Victor. We traced the publication contact back through 3 layers, but the origin is his people. He's planting the story." "How did he know about me?" "Victor makes it his business to know everything about Serafina's life. He has people watching. He always has." Asher's stomach turned. He's been watching her. He's been watching everyone connected to her. You showed up on his radar the moment you accepted the job. So this is what she warned me about. Asher, listen to me. This article is the first shot. It won't be the last. Victor doesn't do small moves. He escalates. He'll go after your credibility, your reputation, and if he finds anything in your past that he can twist, he'll twist it until it breaks. I don't have a past. I'm a mechanic from Mississippi. The most controversial thing I've ever done is overcharge Bobby Trask for a valve cover gasket. That won't stop him. Victor creates narratives. He'll invent what he can't find. Asher hung up and sat in his office for a long time. Then he called Serafina. She answered on the first ring. You saw the article. Victor. Why now? You said he's been quiet for 2 years. Because now he has a reason not to be. You. Me. He doesn't care about you specifically, Asher. He cares about me having something he can't control, someone he can't buy or intimidate. You represent a threat to the narrative he's built, that I'm isolated, vulnerable, unable to function without his shadow over my life. The moment I brought you into Sterling, he saw it as a declaration, and Victor treats declarations like acts of war. Asher pressed his free hand against his forehead. What do? We don't panic. We don't respond publicly. And we don't give him anything real to work with. Victor's power is in perception, not reality. As long as we control the truth, he's fighting shadows. And if he stops fighting shadows and starts fighting us directly, she was quiet for a moment. Then we fight back. 2 days later, the second article dropped. This one wasn't in a trade publication. It was in the local paper, picked up by regional outlets within hours. The headline was more direct: Single Father's Sudden Rise at Billion-Dollar Firm Sparks Controversy. This time, Asher was named. His photo, pulled from his garage's old Facebook page, ran alongside the article. The story painted a picture of a small-town mechanic, plucked from obscurity by a wealthy woman, implying a relationship that called his qualifications into question. The phone started ringing. Reporters, bloggers, people he'd gone to high school with. Asher didn't answer any of them. He went to work, did his job, and kept his head down. But the damage was spreading. Garrett walked into Asher's office on Thursday and closed the door behind him. The team's talking, Garrett said. I know. The articles are making them nervous. They want to know if there's truth to it. Asher looked up at him. Is that what you want to know? Garrett held his gaze. I already know. I've watched you work for 2 months. You're the real thing. I didn't want to believe it at first. I wanted you to fail, and I'm man enough to admit that. But you didn't fail. You made this floor run better than it's run in years. So, no, I don't believe the articles. But I'm one person. You need the whole team. So what do? Garrett leaned against the doorframe. You stop hiding in this office, and you go out there and be the manager they need. Don't address the articles. Don't defend yourself. Just work. Work so hard and so well that the articles become irrelevant. Asher stared at him. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. Garrett opened the door and walked out. Asher sat there for a moment, then stood up, rolled up his sleeves, and walked onto the floor. He worked alongside his team for the rest of the day. Not from his office, not from behind a screen. He was in the bays, under the lifts on his back, under a '72 Corvette, helping Marcus recalibrate the rear differential. He ate lunch with the team. He answered their questions directly. He didn't mention the articles once. By Friday, the whispers had faded. Not disappeared, faded. Enough for Asher to breathe. Then Friday evening his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cole. My name is Sandra Whitmore. I'm a family law attorney representing Victor Langley. Asher's blood went cold. Mr. Langley has filed a petition with the county court requesting an emergency review of the custody arrangement for your son, Elliot James Cole. The petition alleges that your recent change in employment and living circumstances combined with media reports regarding your professional conduct constitute a material change in conditions that may affect the child's welfare. Asher couldn't speak. His chest felt like it was caving in. "Mr. Cole, are you there? He's going after my son. Mr. Langley is exercising his right to. He has no right. He's never met my son. He has nothing to do with my son. This is about Serafina." Silence on the line. Then, "The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. You'll receive formal documentation by mail. I'd recommend retaining counsel, Mr. Cole." The line went dead. Asher stood in his kitchen phone in his hand and felt something break inside him. Not the fragile thing he'd been holding together with duct tape and stubbornness. Something deeper. Something foundational. The floor under his feet, the ceiling above his head, the walls of the life he'd built, all of it cracked at once. Victor Langley had done exactly what Serafina said he would. He'd found the one thing Asher couldn't protect with hard work and determination. The one thing that mattered more than the job, more than Sterling, more than Serafina, more than anything else on this earth. His son. Asher put the phone down. He walked to Elliot's room. The boy was at his desk drawing. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, Dad, look at this. I redesigned the suspension on the Cole Sterling concept. I think the double wishbone setup is better than the McPherson strut because—" "Elliot." Something in Asher's voice stopped him. The boy's smile faded. He put down his pencil. "Dad, what's wrong?" Asher crossed the room, knelt down in front of his son, and pulled him into his arms. He held him so tight that Elliot squirmed. "Dad, you're squishing me." "I know. Are you okay?" "I will be. Your jaw is doing the thing." Asher laughed. It came out broken and wet. "Yeah, it probably is." He held his son for a long time, and in the silence of that small room with Elliot's drawings covering every wall and a pencil still warm on the desk, Asher Cole made a decision. Victor Langley wanted a war. He was going to get one. Asher didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't worry that kept him awake. It was fury. He sat at the kitchen table until 2 a.m. reading every word of the custody petition that arrived by email from Sandra Whitmore's office. The language was clinical, precise, and devastating. It alleged that Asher's sudden and unexplained elevation to a high-profile corporate position suggested an unstable domestic environment and a pattern of dependency on external benefactors that may compromise the child's long-term welfare. It referenced the media articles, the ones Victor himself had planted as evidence of public concern about Asher's fitness as a parent. It was elegant. Asher had to give Victor that. The man had built a trap using Asher's own success as bait. Take the job, improve your life, and watch as that improvement gets weaponized against you in a courtroom. At 2:15, Asher called Serafina. She answered immediately, not groggy, not annoyed, like she'd been waiting. "He filed for custody," Asher said. No greeting, no build-up, silence. Then, "Tell me everything." He read her the key passages. When he finished, the line was quiet for so long, he thought the call had dropped. "Serafina. I'm here. I'm thinking. Think faster." "Asher, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Victor does not want your son. He has no interest in Elliot. He has no legal standing, no biological connection, and no moral ground to stand on. This petition is a weapon, not a custody claim. He's using the court system to pressure you into walking away from Sterling and from me. Then he doesn't know me. No, he doesn't. And that's going to be his mistake." She paused. "I have attorneys, the best in the state. I'm calling Margaret Chen first thing in the morning. She's handled cases against Victor before. She knows how he operates. I can't afford—" "Stop. Don't finish that sentence. You are not paying for this. This is my fight too. Victor is doing this because of me, and I will not stand by while he uses your child as a pawn." Asher gripped the phone so hard his knuckles ached. "I don't take charity, Serafina. This isn't charity. This is me standing next to the man I care about while someone tries to destroy him. If that's something you can't accept, then we have a bigger problem than Victor Langley." The words hit him in the center of his chest, not because they were harsh, because they were true, and because underneath the command in her voice he heard something else: fear. Not for herself, for him, for Elliot. "Okay," he said quietly. "Call Margaret Chen." "I already texted her. She's expecting us at 9. "You texted her before I called you?" "I knew he'd do this, Asher. The moment those articles started, I knew custody would be his next move. It's what he does. He finds the thing you'd die for, and he holds a knife to it." Asher closed his eyes. "I can't lose him, Serafina. Everything else, the job, the money, the future, I can lose all of it. But not him. Not Elliot." "You won't. I promise you." "Don't promise me things you can't control." "Then I'll promise you this. I will fight harder for your son than Victor Langley has ever fought for anything in his miserable life, and I don't lose fights I care about." Asher exhaled, long and slow, like he was releasing something that had been locked inside his ribs. 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. Get some sleep. Not a chance. I know, but try. He hung up and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the house breathe. Down the hall, Elliot slept with his sketchbook and his dreams of cars that didn't exist yet. And Asher made himself a second promise, silent, unspoken, forged in the kind of resolve that only comes when a father's back is against the wall. Nobody was taking his boy, not Victor Langley, not a courtroom, not God himself. Margaret Chen's office was on the 4th floor of a building in Jackson that smelled like old wood and expensive decisions. She was small, 5'2" maybe, with reading glasses perched on her nose and a handshake that could crush a walnut. "Sit down, Mr. Cole," she said. "I've read the petition, I've read the articles, and I've spent the last 3 hours pulling everything I have on Victor Langley, which is considerable." Serafina was already seated. She'd arrived before Asher, which didn't surprise him. The woman operated on a timeline that existed slightly ahead of everyone else's. "Give it to me straight," Asher said. "The petition is garbage. Victor has no standing. He's not a relative, not a guardian, not a concerned party with any legal connection to your child. In any normal court, this gets thrown out in 5 minutes. But Victor doesn't operate in normal courts. He has connections, he has money, and he has a judge, Howard Beckett, who's presided over 2 of his previous cases and ruled in his favor both times. We don't know if Beckett will draw this case, but if he does, the playing field tilts. So what do we do?" Margaret took off her glasses and set them on the desk. "2 things. First, we build a case so bulletproof that even a friendly judge can't ignore it. That means documenting everything. Your employment history, your parenting record, Elliot's school performance, medical records, character references from teachers, neighbors, anyone who can testify that you're a fit parent. We bury the court in evidence that you are exactly what you appear to be, a devoted father who has sacrificed everything for his child." "And the second thing?" Margaret looked at Serafina. Serafina nodded. "We go after Victor." Asher frowned. "What do you mean?" "Victor Langley has been operating in legal gray areas for years," Margaret said. "Shell companies, offshore accounts, questionable financial transactions tied to his divorce from Ms. Lancaster. My firm has been compiling a file on him for 2 years, not for any active case, but because when you deal with a man like Victor, you prepare for the day he comes back. That day is today. You want to use financial dirt to make him drop the petition. I want to present the court with a complete picture of who Victor Langley is. A man who uses the legal system as a weapon. A man with documented financial irregularities that are currently under review by federal regulators. A man whose own attorneys have quietly distanced themselves from his more aggressive tactics. The custody petition isn't about Elliot's welfare. It's about leverage. And when we show the court and Victor that we know exactly what he's doing, the leverage evaporates." Asher looked at Serafina. "You knew about this. The file on Victor." "I've been preparing for this moment since the divorce was finalized," she said. "I told you Victor doesn't disappear. He waits. And while he waited, I built a wall. You could have told me." "I could have, but you needed to walk into Sterling on your own terms, not weighed down by my battles. I was hoping Victor would stay in the shadows. He didn't." Asher wanted to be angry. Part of him was. She'd known the risk brought him into her orbit anyway, and let him fall for her while a predator circled in the dark. But the other part, the bigger part, understood. Because he would have done the same thing. Protect first, explain later. "Margaret," he said, "how long do we have?" 3 weeks until the hearing, but I want to file a counter motion within 10 days. The sooner we put Victor on defense, the less time he has to escalate." "Then let's start." They spent the next 4 hours going through everything. Margaret's assistant brought in boxes, actual boxes, files, documents, financial records, communication logs. Asher's head spun, but he stayed focused, answering every question Margaret threw at him with the same precision he used when diagnosing an engine problem. Every fact, every date, every detail of his life as a single father laid bare on a conference table. When they finally finished, Margaret walked them to the elevator. "Mr. Cole, one more thing. Victor will try to contact you directly. He'll want to gauge you, rattle you, get you to say something he can use. Do not engage. Do not respond. If he shows up at your home, your workplace, or anywhere near Elliot, you call me immediately." "Understood." Margaret shook his hand. Then she shook Serafina's, and something passed between the two women, a look that said more than words. Two people who'd been fighting the same enemy from different fronts, now finally in the same foxhole. In the parking garage, Asher and Serafina stood between their cars. His rusted truck, her black sedan, and the distance between them felt like a mile and an inch at the same time. "I'm sorry," Serafina said. "For what? For bringing this to your door." "You didn't bring it. Victor did, and I walked through the door on my own." "Still. Stop apologizing. You told me what came with you. I said I wasn't going anywhere. I meant it." She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, Serafina Lancaster looked vulnerable. Not weak, never weak, but open, unguarded. Like she'd taken off the last piece of armor and was standing in front of him with nothing between them. "Asher, if this goes badly." "It won't. If it does, if the hearing doesn't go our way, if Victor finds a judge who owes him a favor, I need you to know that I will spend every dollar I have, burn every bridge call in every favor, and dismantle Victor Langley piece by piece before I let him take your son." Asher stepped closer. He took her hand. Her fingers were cold, which surprised him. She always seemed so warm. "I believe you," he said. She squeezed his hand. Hard. And neither of them let go for a long time. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation strategy and the grinding daily effort of holding his life together while it threatened to come apart. Asher worked at Sterling during the day, keeping his head down, his performance flawless, giving Victor nothing to point to. At night, he sat with Margaret's team reviewing documents, rehearsing testimony, going over every detail until he could recite his own life story in his sleep. Elliot knew something was wrong. The boy was too smart not to notice. The late nights, the phone calls behind closed doors, the way Asher held him a little tighter, a little longer, every time they said goodnight. "Dad, are you in trouble?" Elliot asked one evening unprompted while they were eating leftover spaghetti at the kitchen table. Asher put his fork down. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you look like you did when Mom left, except different, angrier." The honesty of it hit Asher like a truck. He took a breath and made a decision. Elliot deserved the truth. Not all of it, he was 7, but enough. "There's a man, a bad man. He's trying to cause problems for us. He's using lawyers and courts to make trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "He's saying I'm not a good enough dad to take care of you." Elliot's eyes went wide. Then they went hard. Hard in a way that a 7-year-old's eyes should never go. That's a lie. I know it is. You're the best dad. You fix everything. You make everything work. You went to that fancy car place so we could have more money, and you still pick me up from school every day, and you never miss bedtime, and you let me draw cars on the kitchen table, even though it makes marks. Elliot. It's a lie, Dad, and lying is wrong. Asher reached across the table and put his hand on his son's head. You're right. It is. And we're going to prove it. I have good people helping me. But I need you to be brave. Can you do that? I'm always brave. I know you are. Dad. Yeah. Can I meet the bad man? Absolutely not. I just want to tell him he's wrong. I know, Bud, but that's my job. Elliot nodded solemnly. Then he picked up his fork and went back to his spaghetti. And Asher watched his son and felt a wave of love so enormous it physically hurt, like his chest wasn't big enough to contain it. Victor made his move on a Wednesday. Asher was leaving Sterling at 5:30, walking to his truck in the parking lot when a car pulled up beside him. Not a sedan, a Bentley, midnight blue. The window rolled down and a face appeared that Asher had only seen in photographs but recognized instantly. Victor Langley, mid-50s, silver-templed, a face that was handsome the way a blade is handsome, sharp cold designed to cut. Mr. Cole, Victor said. His voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that made you feel like you were being complimented even when you were being threatened. Asher stopped walking. Every instinct screamed at him to keep going. Margaret's voice echoed in his head, "Do not engage," but his feet wouldn't move. "I don't have anything to say to you," Asher said. "Then just listen. I only need a minute." Victor tilted his head slightly. "You're a practical man, Mr. Cole. I respect that. So I'll be practical. This custody matter, it doesn't have to go to court. Courts are messy, public, unpleasant for everyone, especially the child. Don't talk about my child. I'm trying to help your child. And you, walk away from Sterling. End your relationship with Serafina. Go back to your little garage and your little life, and the petition disappears. Tomorrow, no hearing, no records, like it never happened." Asher stared at him. The audacity of it. The casual cruelty wrapped in silk. This man was standing in a parking lot, offering to erase a legal threat he'd created, as if he were doing Asher a favor. "You think you can buy me off," Asher said. "I'm not buying you off. I'm offering you clarity. Serafina collects people, Mr. Cole. It's what she does. She finds broken things and fixes them because it makes her feel powerful. You're not the first project, and you won't be the last. When she's finished with you, and she will finish with you, you'll be right back where you started, except you'll have gone through a custody battle that will follow your son for the rest of his life." The words burrowed into Asher like splinters. Not because he believed them, but because they were designed to find the one crack in his armor, the doubt that still lived in the back of his mind. The voice that whispered, "You don't belong here, and she'll see through you eventually, and this is all going to collapse." "You done," Asher said. "Think about it. I'm a patient man. You're a coward. You hide behind lawyers and articles and fake petitions because you don't have the guts to face anyone directly. You didn't come here to negotiate with me. You came here to see if I'd break. I won't." Victor's expression didn't change, not even a flicker. "Everyone breaks, Mr. Cole. It's just a matter of pressure. Get out of my parking lot." Victor smiled, thin, cold, predatory. The window rolled up. The Bentley pulled away. Asher stood in the empty lot, fists clenched, heart slamming against his ribs. He pulled out his phone and called Margaret. He was here, Victor, at Sterling, in the parking lot. "Did you say anything?" "I told him to leave." "What did he say?" Asher repeated the conversation verbatim. Every word. His memory was razor sharp when adrenaline was involved. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, "He just made a mistake." "How?" "He approached you directly with a quid pro quo. Drop the relationship and the petition goes away. That's coercion. And if you're willing to testify to that in court, it blows his entire case apart. He can't claim concern for Elliot's welfare while simultaneously offering to withdraw the petition in exchange for personal concessions. It contradicts the fundamental basis of his filing. Asher felt something shift. A weight he'd been carrying since the night of the phone call loosened its grip. Just a fraction, just enough. We've got him. We've got a crack, and I'm going to drive a truck through it. Margaret filed the countermotion the next morning. It included Asher's testimony about Victor's parking lot visit, the compiled financial records showing Victor's pattern of using legal proceedings as leverage communications between Victor's PR firm and the journalist who'd written the articles about Asher, and a forensic accounting report detailing 3 offshore accounts linked to Victor that were under preliminary federal review. The countermotion was 47 pages long. Margaret sent it to Victor's attorneys at 8 a.m. with a cover letter that Asher read 3 times because it was the most beautifully aggressive piece of legal writing he'd ever seen. By noon, Victor's lead attorney called Margaret. "They want to talk," Margaret told Asher on the phone. "What kind of talk? The kind where they realize they brought a knife to a gunfight and they want to negotiate the terms of retreat." No negotiation. He drops the petition, all of it, publicly, and he signs an agreement to stay away from me, from Elliot, and from Serafina. No contact, no proxies, no more articles, nothing. That's aggressive. He came to my workplace and threatened my family. I'm past polite. Margaret paused. Then she laughed, short, sharp, surprised. "I'll make the call." The negotiation took 4 days. Victor's attorneys pushed back, haggled, postured, threatened countersuits. Margaret dismantled every argument with the patience of a surgeon and the precision of a sniper. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't need to. The evidence did the talking. On the 4th day, Victor signed. The petition was withdrawn. The agreement was filed. Victor Langley, for the first time in his adult life, had been forced to retreat, not because he chose to, but because a mechanic from Mississippi and a 5'2" attorney from Jackson had made him. Asher got the call at 3 in the afternoon. He was on the floor at Sterling, helping Marcus calibrate a fuel injection system on a '68 Camaro. His phone rang. Margaret. "It's done." 2 words. Asher set down his wrench. He walked to his office. He closed the door. He sat down in his chair. And he cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears running down his face while he sat alone in a glass-walled office in a facility he never imagined he'd work in, thinking about a boy who drew cars at the kitchen table and a woman who sent a car for him on a Saturday night, and a life that had tried to crush him and failed. His phone buzzed. A text from Serafina. "Margaret told me. It's over." He typed back through blurred vision. "It's over. Come to dinner tonight. Bring Elliot. We're my house. I'll cook. You cook badly, but tonight I don't care." Asher laughed. Wet, messy, uncontrolled. Garrett walked past the office window, saw Asher's face and stopped. He looked at Asher through the glass. Asher nodded once. Garrett nodded back, one sharp dip of the chin, and kept walking. That was enough. Asher wiped his face, stood up, and went back to work. There were cars to build, a team to lead, and a son to pick up from school. And for the first time since Hank Dillard's phone call on that Tuesday morning, the call about the rent. The call that started everything. Asher Cole walked through the world without the weight of fear on his shoulders. It didn't mean the fear was gone forever. He knew better than that. Victor had signed a piece of paper, but paper doesn't change a man's nature. Serafina knew it too. So did Margaret. But today, in this moment, it was enough. The petition was dead. Elliot was safe. And Asher had stood his ground against a man who'd never been told no, and forced him to hear it. He picked up Elliot at 3:30. The boy climbed into the truck and immediately noticed something different. "You look weird," Elliot said. "Weird how?" "Your face is doing something." "What's my face doing?" I think you're smiling, like actually smiling, not the fake one." "We're going to dinner tonight. At Serafina's house. Really? Does she have a garage? I don't know. Can I bring my sketchbook? You bring your sketchbook everywhere. So that's a yes. Asher reached over and messed up his son's hair. Elliot swatted his hand away, grinning. And they drove through town windows down the late afternoon sun cutting through the windshield. Two people who'd been through the fire and come out the other side, singed but standing. Asher glanced at Elliot. The boy was already drawing. A new design. The lines were bolder than before, more confident, like something inside him had shifted too. Dad? Yeah. The bad man. Is he gone? Asher thought about it. He's gone for now. Good. Elliot didn't look up from his drawing. Because I have a lot of cars to design, and I don't have time for bad people. Asher smiled. The real one. Serafina's house wasn't what Asher expected. He'd imagined a mansion. Something sprawling and cold with too many rooms and not enough life in them. Instead, the car turned down a gravel road lined with old oaks and stopped in front of a farmhouse. A real farmhouse. White clapboard wraparound porch, a screen door that creaked when she pushed it open. This is your house, Elliot said, pressing his face against the truck window. Don't sound so surprised, Serafina called from the porch. She was barefoot, jeans, a flannel shirt rolled to her elbows. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot and there was flour on her cheek. Elliot looked at Asher. She looks normal. She is normal. Dad, she's a billionaire. How do you know that? I can read. I Googled her on Mrs. Patterson's computer. Asher closed his eyes briefly. We're going to talk about boundaries later. They got out of the truck, and Elliot walked up the porch steps with the cautious curiosity of a kid entering a museum. Serafina crouched down to his level. Welcome to my house, Elliot. I'm making lasagna. Fair warning, it might be terrible. My dad makes terrible lasagna too. He burns the cheese. I do not burn the cheese, Asher said. You burned it last Tuesday. That was intentional. Crispy cheese is a style. Serafina laughed, and Elliot grinned, and just like that the ice was broken. The boy followed her inside, already asking questions about the house, the kitchen, whether she had a workshop, whether there was a garage, whether the gravel driveway was compacted correctly, because he'd read that improper drainage could cause foundation issues. Serafina looked over her shoulder at Asher with wide eyes. Asher shrugged. He reads a lot. Dinner was imperfect and exactly right. The lasagna was slightly overcooked. The garlic bread was slightly underdone. The salad was fine because even Serafina admitted you couldn't mess up lettuce. They ate at a long wooden table in the kitchen, and the conversation flowed the way it does when people stop performing and just exist together. Elliot dominated the discussion. He told Serafina about his designs, every single one, pulling his sketchbook out and flipping through pages, with the intensity of an engineer presenting to a board of directors. Serafina listened to every word, not politely, not with the half-attention adults usually give children. She asked real questions, challenged his assumptions, pushed him to think bigger. The solar roof panels are smart, she said, studying his latest drawing. But the surface area might not generate enough power for highway speeds. Have you thought about regenerative braking to supplement? Elliot's jaw dropped. You know about regenerative braking. I own a car company, Elliot. Right. Sorry, I forgot. He grabbed his pencil. Okay, so if I integrate a kinetic energy recovery system into the rear axle. Now you're thinking. Asher sat back in his chair and watched them. His son and this woman hunched over a sketchbook at a kitchen table, talking about energy recovery systems. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Something settled inside him. Not excitement. Not relief. Something quieter. The feeling of pieces fitting together that he hadn't even realized were scattered. After dinner, Elliot fell asleep on the couch with his sketchbook on his chest. Asher covered him with a blanket and joined Serafina on the porch. The night was warm. Crickets were screaming in the grass. She handed him a glass of whiskey, and they sat in the wooden chairs close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "He's extraordinary," Serafina said. "He gets it from his mother." Asher paused. "That's the one good thing Karen gave him, her brain. The rest he figured out on his own. He gets things from you too." "Like what?" "His stubbornness, his loyalty, the way he looks at a problem like it personally offended him, and he won't rest until he's solved it." She took a sip of her whiskey. "Sound familiar?" Asher smiled into his glass. "Maybe a little." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. The kind that only exists between people who've been through something together and come out the other side knowing exactly where they stand. "I want to show you something," Serafina said. "Tomorrow, at Sterling. Can you come in early?" "How early?" 6. "I'm always there by 6. "I know. That's one of the things Robert tells me every week. The man beats me to the building, Serafina, every single day. Robert talks about me. Robert sends me weekly updates on every department head. Yours are always the shortest. Is that good or bad? It means there's nothing to report because everything runs perfectly. It's the highest compliment Robert Ainsley knows how to give." Asher finished his whiskey. The warmth spread through his chest and mixed with something else, something that had been building for weeks, maybe since the moment he saw her leaning against that Mustang on Route 12. He turned to look at her. She was already looking at him. "Serafina." "Yes." "Why me?" The real answer. Not the one about the ignition coil, not the one about instinct, the real one. She held his gaze for a long time. Then she set her glass down and turned her body toward him. "Because you were kind when you had every reason not to be. Because you were broke, exhausted, and drowning, and when a stranger needed help, you drove out in the heat with your own tools and refused to take a dime. Because when you looked at my car, I saw something in your eyes that I haven't seen in anyone in 15 years. What? Love. Not for me. For the work. For the craft. For the thing itself. You loved that engine the way a painter loves a canvas. And I thought, if this man can love a machine that deeply imagine what he could do with the right tools, the right support, the right chance." Asher's throat tightened. "You took a hell of a gamble." "I did. Best one I've ever made." He reached over and took her hand. She laced her fingers through his, and they sat on that porch holding hands in the dark, listening to the crickets, and neither of them said another word because nothing else needed saying. The next morning, Asher was at Sterling by 5:45. Serafina was already there. She met him in the lobby and led him through the facility to a section he'd never been in before, a wing past the main workshop behind a set of double doors that required a keycard. "What is this?" Asher asked. "This is R&D, research and development. It's where we build the future." She pushed through the doors, and Asher stepped into a space that made the rest of Sterling look ordinary. The equipment was a generation ahead of anything on the main floor. Modeling stations with software he'd only read about. A wind tunnel. A materials testing lab. And in the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat something covered by a gray tarp. Serafina walked to the platform and stopped. "Sterling has 3 divisions: custom builds, restorations, and concept development. You've been running the first 2 brilliantly, but the third one has been dormant for 18 months because I haven't found the right person to lead it." "Serafina." "I'm not finished." She gripped the edge of the tarp. "I didn't hire you to be a floor manager forever, Asher. I hired you because you think like a designer. You see problems before they happen. You understand how a car should feel, not just how it should function. Robert saw it in your first week. Garrett saw it, though he'd rather eat glass than admit it. And I saw it on the side of Route 12 when you looked at my Mustang and your hands started moving before your brain caught up." She pulled the tarp off. Underneath was a chassis, raw aluminum. No body panels, no engine. Just a skeleton, beautiful, precise, and waiting. This is the Sterling GT2, Serafina said. The successor to the concept car you saw in the lobby photograph. It's been sitting here for 18 months because the previous design lead left and no one has been able to pick up where he stopped. She looked at Asher. I want you to finish it. Asher couldn't speak. He walked to the chassis and put his hand on the frame. The aluminum was cold under his palm. He ran his fingers along the welding seam where the A-pillar met the roofline and felt the precision of it. Someone had started something extraordinary here and left it incomplete. This is a mid-engine layout, he said quietly. The weight distribution is biased toward the rear, 60-40, maybe 62-38. The previous designer wanted 55-45. He couldn't make the packaging work. Because he was trying to move the engine forward. You don't move the engine, you move the driver. Shift the cockpit 18 inches ahead, extend the wheelbase, and the balance corrects itself without compromising the drivetrain geometry. Serafina stared at him. You've been looking at this for 30 seconds. I've been thinking about cars like this my entire life. I just never had one in front of me. She stepped closer. So is that a yes? It's a yes if I can keep running the floor too. I'm not abandoning the team. I wouldn't expect you to. We'll restructure. Garrett takes primary oversight on daily operations, which is what he's wanted all along, and you split your time between the floor and R&D. Garrett's going to love that. Garrett respects you, more than you know. Asher looked at the chassis again. His mind was already racing. The cockpit placement, the suspension architecture, the aerodynamic profile. Ideas were firing faster than he could catch them, piling on top of each other like cars in a highway collision. I need Elliot to see this, he said. Serafina smiled. I was counting on it. That Saturday, Asher brought Elliot to the R&D wing. The boy walked through the doors, saw the chassis, and stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't say a word for a full minute. Then he walked to the platform, circled the frame once, and looked at Asher with an expression that was equal parts wonder and fury. You've been working here this whole time, and you didn't tell me about this. I just found out about it myself. I need paper. I need a lot of paper. And my colored pencils. The good ones, not the school ones. Serafina handed him a tablet with a digital drawing application. Elliot looked at it, looked at her and said, This is acceptable. Within an hour, the boy had produced 4 preliminary body panel sketches. They were rough. They were a child's work. But the instinct behind them, the sense of proportion, the understanding of how form follows function, was unmistakable. Asher pinned the sketches to the wall above his new workstation. They stayed there for the next 6 months. The GT2 consumed Asher's life in the best possible way. He worked on it in the mornings before the team arrived. He worked on it in the evenings after Elliot's bedtime. He brought in ideas from the floor, things he'd learned from restoring classics, from building custom cars, from 20 years of fixing machines with limited tools and unlimited imagination. Garrett, true to form, resisted the restructuring for about a week before admitting that running the floor without Asher hovering over him was actually what he'd wanted all along. Their relationship shifted from grudging respect to genuine partnership. Garrett handled operations with the iron efficiency of a man who'd been born for the role. Asher handled vision with the creative intensity of a man who'd finally been given permission to dream. They argued constantly about schedules, priorities, resource allocation, and whether the break room coffee was getting worse. The arguments were productive, sometimes even fun, and underneath them was a foundation of mutual trust that neither man acknowledged, because acknowledging it would have required a level of emotional vulnerability that made them both uncomfortable. Sterling thrived. The E-Type restoration was completed on time and under budget. The client cried when he saw it. 3 new projects came in. Revenue climbed. Robert Ainsley's weekly reports to Serafina got shorter and shorter because there was less and less to worry about. Victor Langley stayed gone. Margaret Chen's office received no communications. The media articles dried up. Whatever Victor was doing wherever he wasn't pointed at them anymore. Asher didn't trust the silence, and neither did Serafina, but they accepted it the way you accept a ceasefire, grateful for the peace, vigilant for the next shot. Asher paid off his back rent. Then he paid off Elliot's school tuition. Then he paid Margie back for 6 months of free breakfasts, which she tried to refuse, and he insisted on, and they argued about it for 20 minutes until she finally took the money and said, "Fine, but you're still eating here every Saturday, and you're still not paying for Saturdays." He drove to Hank Dillard's office and wrote a check for the full amount owed. Hank looked at the check, looked at Asher, and shook his hand. "Glad you landed on your feet, Ash." "I landed on my feet because people gave me time when I needed it, including you." Hank had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "Well, glad it worked out." Asher walked out of Hank's office and stood in the sunlight and felt the weight of the last 3 years lift off his shoulders. Not all of it. You don't carry that kind of weight without some of it settling into your bones permanently. But enough. Enough to stand up straighter. Enough to breathe without the tightness in his chest that had been his constant companion since Karen left. On a Sunday afternoon in October, 4 months after the custody petition collapsed, Asher and Serafina took Elliot to the Automotive Museum in Jackson. The same museum Elliot had needed a $20 permission slip to visit with his class. The same $20 that had been the last bill in Asher's wallet. Elliot tore through the exhibits like a tornado. He spent 45 minutes at the cutaway V8 engine explaining to a bewildered museum docent why the valve timing was optimized for torque rather than horsepower. He sketched 3 exhibit cars in his notebook. He asked 17 questions about the museum's restoration workshop, 4 of which the staff couldn't answer. Asher and Serafina followed behind, hand in hand, watching the boy consume knowledge like oxygen. "He's going to change this industry," Serafina said. "He's 7. He's 7, and he just corrected a museum employee about combustion chamber design. He's going to change the industry." Asher squeezed her hand. "Then we'd better make sure he has the tools." "That's what Sterling is for." He stopped walking. She turned to face him. "Is that what Sterling is for?" he asked. "Is that why you built it? Not just as a business, but as a launch pad. For people like you, people like Elliot, people who have the talent but never had the shot." She stepped closer. "My family's money was inherited. I didn't earn it. I didn't deserve it. But I could decide what to do with it. And I decided to build a place where brilliance wasn't gated by pedigree, where a mechanic from Route 12 could walk in and be recognized for what he actually is. And what's that? Exceptional, stubborn, infuriating, and the best thing that's ever happened to my company and to me." Asher pulled her close. She pressed her forehead against his chest, and he rested his chin on top of her head, and they stood there in the middle of an automotive museum while their 7-year-old lectured a docent about fuel injection, and everything was exactly as it should be. The GT2 prototype was completed the following spring. Asher stood in the R&D wing at 6 in the morning alone looking at the finished car. It was stunning. Low, aggressive, purposeful. Every line served a function. Every curve solved a problem. The mid-engine layout he'd redesigned, the cockpit placement he'd reimagined, the suspension architecture that had kept him up for 100 nights, all of it came together into something that didn't just look like the future. It felt like it. On the wall above his workstation, Elliot's 4 original sketches were still pinned in place, slightly yellowed corners curling. The body panels of the GT2 didn't match the sketches exactly, but the spirit was there, the ambition, the belief that something beautiful could come from nothing. Asher heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Elliot and Serafina stood in the doorway. Elliot was holding a new drawing, the GT3 concept already in progress, because the boy never stopped. Serafina was holding 2 cups of coffee. "Well," Serafina said, "does it drive?" "Only one way to find out." They walked out to the test track behind the facility, a half-mile loop that Sterling used for shakedowns. Asher slid behind the wheel of the GT2. The cockpit fit him like it had been measured to his body, which it had, because he'd designed it that way. He turned the key. The engine caught, roared, and settled into a low, resonant idle that vibrated through the steering column and into his hands. Elliot was standing at the edge of the track, sketchbook clutched to his chest. Serafina stood beside him, one hand on the boy's shoulder. Asher looked at them through the windshield. His son. This woman. The life he'd built from wreckage and willpower, and the stubborn refusal to accept that he was meant for small things. He pressed the accelerator. The GT2 launched forward, pinning him to the seat, the engine screaming through the gears with a sound that shook the morning air. He took the first corner and felt the suspension respond tight, balanced exactly as he'd designed it. The car moved like it was reading his mind. Like it was an extension of his hands, his instincts, his 20 years of grease and grit and dreams deferred. He came around the final turn and pulled to a stop in front of Elliot and Serafina. He killed the engine and sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing hard. Elliot ran up to the car and pressed his face against the driver's window. How was it? Asher opened the door and stepped out. He knelt down in front of his son and put both hands on the boy's shoulders. It was everything. Elliot grinned. I told you, you should always listen to me. Yeah, you did. Serafina walked over and stood beside them. Asher stood up and looked at her. She looked back with those green eyes, sharp, warm, and full of a future neither of them could have imagined, standing on the side of Route 12 on the hottest day of the year. So, she said, what's next? Asher looked at Elliot. Elliot held up his sketchbook already open to the GT3 concept. The boy's eyes were on fire. Asher looked at the GT2 still ticking and cooling on the track, a machine born from nothing but talent and tenacity and the refusal to quit. He looked at Serafina, the woman who saw what no one else could see, who reached into a broken-down life and pulled out something worth believing in. What's next, Asher said, is everything we haven't built yet. He took Serafina's hand. He put his other hand on Elliot's head, and the three of them walked back toward Sterling, toward the workshop, toward the drafting tables and the engines and the raw materials of a future that was theirs to shape. Asher Cole had started with nothing, a failing garage and eviction notice, and a boy who believed in him when no one else did. He'd been given a chance by a woman who saw through the grease to the brilliance underneath. He'd been tested by a man who wanted to break him and failed. He'd stood in courtrooms and parking lots and glass-walled offices, and he'd never once backed down. Not because he was fearless, because he had something worth fighting for. And now, with Elliot's drawings on the wall and Serafina's hand in his, and the sound of the GT2's engine still ringing in his ears, Asher Cole finally understood what his father never got the chance to learn, what his ex-wife never stayed long enough to see, and what Victor Langley would never comprehend. That a man's worth isn't measured by where he starts. It's measured by what he builds when someone finally gives him the tools. And Asher Cole was just getting started.